Oh, I'm gonna. And yeah, so this speech is True Mother's speech at the victory celebration of the World Summit. But I gave it this catchy phrase because it was so timely. The way she specifically was talking about Europe in many different ways towards the end of this speech, and specifically calling out certain parts of Europe. And this was right before, I think about 9 days before Russia invaded Ukraine. So just very timely. So let's get into it. Okay. I'm grateful that the hard work carried out around the world in preparation for these occasions have borne the fruit of victory. And remember, we saw the photos from last week. This was an absolute victory on so many different levels, the level of people who engaged, and particularly the United States who really came to show up. Most of the nations were not able to get into Korea. They were not given a waiver, which means they could skip the quarantine period. But our highest level United States people were allowed to. And even though we were given waiver for those certain people, they still had to go through quarantine for 24 hours in this like really not nice hotel. So just they were really dedicated, they didn't complain, and they really showed up completely. Okay, first sentence here is an important one. If the truth had really been revealed in 1962, which was the previous year of the Black Tiger, there would have been no opposition from Christianity. And I want to read that again. If the truth had really been revealed in 1962, which was the previous year of the Black Tiger, there would have been no opposition from Christianity. And there's a lot to take from this sentence, and I want to really highlight it because it comes up more and more often. It has a lot to do with the content that we learned in Korea. And, first of all, she's saying this in the context of the Victorious World Summit, which is at a level of victory we have not seen before. That level of heads of state, like so many different people from all around the world standing with True Parents, thanking True Parents for their work. And Mother is basically saying here, had the truth been revealed in 1962, 60 years ago, the last year of the Black Tiger, which we're in right now, then Christianity would have received True Parents. And, what is that truth? It's important to answer that question and pray over that question. But it's, we know True Parents were blessed in 1960, and Father was really preaching hard and witnessing was happening. So it's not like the truth was not told about, who True Father was and what he came to do. So why is Mother talking about if the truth had been told? What she's hinting at here is that there's this whole other part of providential history that has not really been revealed and talked about until this point in time. And as you read on, and if you connect the different speeches we've read so far, it absolutely has to do with True Mother's identity as the only begotten daughter. And if you make that connection, what she's saying is, if the truth had been revealed about who the only begotten daughter is and what that means, then there would have been no opposition from Christianity for True Parents. And this is kind of like shocking, like this is really a little bit different, a little bit challenging, but Mother is over and over again emphasizing the importance of the only begotten daughter, not to glorify herself, not to just lift herself up, but to really understand what this means for history and what it means for the providence. So that's kind of, she jumps right in, right? It's like she just started her speech and she's saying quite a dramatic sentence here, but it's almost like now that this victory from the World Summit came, Mother has the platform to claim that victory and speak from this point of view, because up until this point, we haven't really understood. Up until this point, we're still acting on faith, even when, right before the rally in 2019, at the end of the year, they were talking about restoring 7 nations, which was just a crazy idea. And we didn't really think that was possible. But she's saying, if you unite with me as the only begotten daughter, things are going to happen. So please unite with me. So she's got the foundation and the proof to be able to say what she's saying now. Okay, so however, that did not happen The truth was not revealed. And now we are welcoming the year of the Black Tiger again for the first time in 60 years. This is the year when true families, Chunbo families, should step forward and tell the world boldly about the existence of our Heavenly Parent, who has indeed been enduring and waiting all this time. They should shout loudly about him and thus bring beautiful flowers to bloom in every part of the world. And what I notice from mothers, as much as she's proclaiming only begotten daughter and putting that title in front of much of her sentences, she's also always talking about the importance of Heavenly Parent and speaking boldly about Heavenly Parent. And what I'm experiencing is the more that I engage with people about this topic of Heavenly Parent, it opens up so many doors that have not been opened up before, because we have this very narrow view of who God is, and that God is our Father, right? There's this very narrow, especially in Christianity, specific perspective of who God is. But this idea of who a Heavenly Parent is, who has been suffering in the world and has a deep longing heart for all of us, and is a parent of both masculine and feminine nature. And it brings up this heart of filial piety in a different way than just God up in heaven, right? It cultivates something in your heart where you want to relate with God differently. And I think that's why she's focusing on this so much. She's asking us to be bold about it, to really lead with this idea of who Heavenly Parent is. And through that, we can really, she's calling, bring beautiful flowers to bloom, but to create more citizens of Chenoguk, people who are true children of Heavenly Parent. As I said the day before yesterday in her big speech at the World Summit, the owner of the universe and this earth is our Heavenly Parent. Fallen people, however, do not know about Heavenly Parent and are claiming the world as their own and building up their national borders. Among the nations called superpowers in the world today are some, such as Russia and China, that do not know heaven and restrict religious freedoms. Isn't that true? All nations in Europe where the Christian culture emerged have to stand up in front of those countries. Now, this is quite a strong statement Mother's making. I think it's also coming off of the World Summit, which was, world leaders coming together. We obviously did not have any world leaders from Russia and China who stood up at the World Summit and were engaged with us. And Mother's calling them out because these are the more communist, socialist type nations who do not lift up who God is, do not have that as a value that's respected. More than that, or as an extension of that, they don't respect the individual liberties and freedoms of people. And Mother's really calling this out as a major issue in our world today. These are the nations who don't know Heavenly Parent at all. Other nations may have, some religious perspective that is accepted and honored, or even, religious state. But Mother's, first of all, saying, fallen people don't know about who Heavenly Parent is, and they're claiming the world as their own, meaning they're thinking from a very external point of view. I'm the president, I'm the leader, I'm the owner, I have power. But like she said in her last speech, it's not your presidency that gives you the authority. It's whether or not you are really understanding who God is and really trying to take care of the world from that point of view. But she quite strongly is calling out Russia and China, these are two very hot topics. Even before Russia invaded Ukraine, these are two very hot topics in the geopolitical world. The only way to become Heavenly Parent's children is to accept true parents and live together as brothers and sisters in Heavenly Parent's embrace. So if we're teaching about Heavenly Parent, then the next step from that is, how can I become a filial child? The only way to do that is to accept true parents and to live together as brothers and sisters. Christianity blossomed and spread worldwide from the European continent. So she's honoring Europe for that. Much mission work was carried out in Africa. And here Mother is now calling out the misuse of Christianity's name and its religious identity as they carried it out. Yet as people did not know the true nature of Jesus, They failed to practice love for the sake of others, and in the end, built a civilization that took from others. Christian civilization is consequently in decline, having been unable to fulfill its responsibility. And this part really hit me hard, because when you look at history and you look at Christian history, and you see how people who were moving forward in the name of Jesus really clearly did not understand Jesus. If they could enslave people, if they could rape people, if they could take over towns and civilizations, how could such mass movements of people be walking around in Jesus's name and be abusing people so horrifically? It's so shameful that that is a part of Christian history. And yeah, it's absolutely heartbreaking. And so, the Christian civilization was built on that, right? The empire of Christianity was built on that. And she's saying, because of those wrong turns, and because people stopped really understanding who Jesus was and why he came, now Christianity is suffering as a result of that. That is why, as the true parent, I set out to first restore the African continent, which had experienced the most suffering and difficulty. And that's an explanation I hadn't heard before, that was one of the reasons why Mother worked to really work with the heads of states of Africa first. And Africa became the first continent that true parents could really claim as conditionally restored, because so many heads of state, so many leaders of countries and different alliances between countries stood with True Mother and welcomed True Mother. But she went there because she recognized that, I think, Christianity in particular really abused Africa. And that's really the true mother's heart. That's really the true parent's heart, to recognize that. And she says, as a result, in the position of having restored nations, 7 religious groups in Africa and the region, I was able to proclaim the firm establishment of Chanukah. And so she's really giving the credit to Africa for they're the reason that True Mother could claim firmly that Chanukah had been established, which is amazing. I mean, it's really amazing, even after everything that the African people went through, that our ancestors put people through. They're the reason that true parents could begin to be accepted at such a world level, such a high level. The words of the Bible that the last will be first, from Matthew 20:16, refer to Africa. So she's really honoring Africa here, that even though they were really abused and mistreated and maybe still developing in terms of economics, but they were the first spiritually to really recognize true parents from the heads of state level. Amazing. We are ultimately on the path as one family of humanity, attending the Heavenly Parent. To overcome the problems that the European continent is now facing in Eastern Europe and Northeast Asia, you should be completely united with true parents. And these, outside of the church realm, these areas are hot topics in terms of like looking what's happening in the geopolitical world. And so a mother's speaking from a horizontal and spiritual perspective here. And she says, if we can really unite with true parents, we can overcome those problems that are happening. By so doing, you will become the first, as she mentioned in the last quote. As heavenly parents, true children who can stand in the position of the elder brother and embrace those 2 nations that do not know about God. The 2 nations she's talking about, again, are Russia and China. The 2 nations that really clearly don't recognize God, but still have a lot of power and, even their size, right? Their population, their physical size of their nation, their countries. Please understand that now is the opportune time to create the environment wherein you inspire and embrace your younger brothers. And so she's asking us to think about those 2 nations and how can we embrace them? How can we bring them closer to true parents? That this is the time. There's a special significance to the time we're living in to embrace those 2 nations, which have been very difficult to embrace as unificationists. Let us look back a few decades. In the 1970s, True Father tried to save America in order to embrace the world. In truth, at that time, our foundation in the United States was somewhat weaker than that in Europe. We called on major leaders from Europe to the United States to educate America and align it with heaven's providence. Those European leaders worked very hard for that purpose. So Mother is explaining here that, in Europe, the foundation was stronger and, more members joining and, a little bit easier in some ways. But Father really sought to come to America because he saw that through saving America, he could save the world, through lifting up America, helping America stand in its role as the elder son nation, that the elder son could go out and take care of others. So they brought leaders from Europe to educate American leaders and raise up the American leaders. But she goes on to honor the European leaders. At the time, there were 3 leading figures in the United States. They were women, very active and confident. They took the lead in attending True Parents and put in so much effort. Now, I'm sorry to say, I don't know who those were. Maybe some of you could put that together and maybe I could have asked around beforehand, but I think we can figure it out together. But just very interesting to notice this, that Mother's honoring the fact that they were women. They took the lead in attending True Parents and put in so much effort. And when this was happening live, it was like, you could tell the translation was having a hard time because it was almost like Mother was going down memory lane and the translator was trying to like connect the dots, like, why is Mother talking about it? What's the context? And, that kind of thing. She said, at that time, True Father held the Day of Hope events to save America. He created a choir and there was a sister who played the piano. I mean, that's like such a specific memory to be thinking about and speaking about, right? There's a sister in the Day of Hope choir who played piano. She was remembering. Unlike the 3 women leaders I just mentioned, she was an American, but she had an Oriental air about her. I remember her name as Linda. I had such a good impression of her. She was blessed with Mark Brand, who works for UPF in Europe, and I understand they are living happily together. And so it's so interesting for Mother to just like be remembering this one specific person from this little memory, and why is she thinking that way? Why is it coming up for her? I thought some big like crazy announcement was coming because of where she was going, right? But it didn't. The reason I'm speaking about this is that he is doing great work introducing and educating European dignitaries, including Mr. Barroso, who is one of Europe's high VIP contacts who supports the World Summit. And then she names a few more of the European leaders by name. There are also Regional President Michael Balcom, Chunmiwan Chair Katsumi Otsuka, and UPF Chair Jacques Marion. So these are all Mother's naming them by name, which it's coming across quite nicely, right? And sweetly, but the way it came across live, I mean, if your name is being called by True Mother, you're shaking in your pants, right? Something's happening. She's honoring you, but like at the same time, your heart must be pumping, like what's coming? Why is this happening? Why is she specifically mentioning these European leaders? Mother does this on purpose. She doesn't randomly name people, right? She's not just like thanking each person individually, but it's like this loving way of raising up, acknowledging, but also making them pay attention and, take it seriously because something is coming, right? The time has now come for Europe to rise up one final time and accelerate its efforts to aid heaven's providence. So she's really calling out Europe. I remember when I was hearing it live, it didn't come across that politely. It came across like, Europe, you better shape up. Like you need to do more. You need to educate more. You need to, the energy that came across, and I feel like the translation that came across was more like, you need to be reaching heads of state in Europe right now. You need to be doing that. You need to bring that victory because Europe hasn't really broken through in that way. They have brought a lot of like other periphery high VIPs, but not a head of state. You must confidently say that the way for humanity, let me just pause one more thing. And it goes back to the other paragraph where Mother was talking about, we brought leaders from Europe to America because the foundation was strong and Europe was able to help America. And so I almost get the sense that Mother is saying, if we can get heads of state from Europe, then that's really going to shake up the current heads of states of America and of other big nations, because they've reached Africa, right? They've reached that point with Africa. So I feel like what she's saying, the next step is the countries in Europe. If we can get sitting heads of state to stand with True Mother, that's the next stage. And Europe needs to do that for the sake of serving the world. The time has come for Europe to rise up one final time and accelerate its efforts to aid heaven's providence. You must confidently say that the way for humanity to survive, for Europe and the world to survive, is to attend Heavenly Parent. So she's saying that she says the world, but she says for Europe specifically to survive, it needs to attend Heavenly Parent. So some kind of change needs to happen for Europe to survive. Since True Parents can qualify us to attend Heavenly Parent, I mentioned those people's names in the hope that they will shout with a loud voice, let's become a Europe that is one with True Parents. So Mother is, lovingly calling on the European leaders she mentioned to stand up, but it's also quite an intense calling on them. It's really pushing them and challenging them and putting a high expectation, because she knows it's important for Europe to stand up right now. As I have said, Europe needs to unite and educate the two strong powers, Russia and China, that are posing a problem right now. The two strong powers that do not know about God. Teach them, create bonds with them as your younger brothers, and bring them to Heavenly Parent. I mean, this is an incredible task, an incredible assignment to give to anybody. And I can just imagine what it must feel like to be receiving that assignment, to be responsible to educate Russia and China. And what's interesting is when we spoke with the family-fed president of Ukraine, and Dr. Jenkins was asking, what can we do to help you? His main answer was to decommunize that area. That is the most important thing that we could be doing, is to educate people. I mean, that's not what you would expect, right? Let's give them aid, let's push for political power, that kind of thing. His answer was, we need to decommunize this area because all the problems stem from an ideological understanding. And if we can solve that, that can solve so much. The difference of Ukraine is it's more freedom based, and it came out of this like Russian era of the USSR. So it knows, it fought for its independence, right? It fought for freedom. So it understands the difference that ideology and political stance can really make. I was pondering something. As we welcome the year of the Black Tiger, I gave thought to what best symbolizes this year, the year in which heaven's fortune and authority should be revealed. That is why I asked for neckties and scarves to be made. I presented them to the heads of state this time, and I believe they were presented to our regional leaders yesterday. And these are, if maybe you've seen them, I've received a few of them, these scarves, and the men have neckties. They all have black tigers on them. Actually, Dr. Jenkins showed me that Speaker Newt Gingrich did an interview on Fox News while he was wearing True Mother's tie. It's a green tie. He wore it on St. Patrick's Day. So just very cute that those people were given it and they can wear them. And she says, if you can take some extra ones, you can give them as gifts to high-level guests who can help with the providence. And Mother did send home, at least with Dr. Jenkins, some special gifts for each of our VIPs that he followed up with and met with and gave them these gifts from True Mother. And she's inviting people to use these as gifts from Mother as a way to open up the door of working together more closely. As you do, explain things well to them and ask them to work together with you for heaven's providence. In other words, it is my hope that you will build relationships with good people. Do you understand? This is really like a motherly way that she's thought so detailed about what can I give my leaders as a gift from me so that they can, get closer with important VIPs who can really support the providence. She went, as detailed as that, as to prepare different gifts. And from what I understand, she, approves the designs and puts a lot of investment in it. So that's really a mother's heart. And whenever she says, "Do you understand?" I try to pay attention, because I feel like she says that because she senses from the room that she's not quite being understood. So I try to pay attention. She's asking us to use these gifts to build relationships with people who can work with us for heaven's providence. She wants us to build relationships with good people. And that's why she's giving us these gifts. I had the impression that all leaders had received the necktie and scarf, but I have been made aware that they were not yet given to some who worked tremendously hard for the summit, such as Dr. Walsh, Dr. Jenkins, and Tom McDivitt from America. So I'd like to give them to you now. Thomas Walsh, Tom McDivitt, and Michael Jenkins. They came up, they received it. She gave them the gift, and she said, "Please approach people with heaven's authority." Dr. Walsh, please convey the gifts to Dr. Taj Hamad, who works for UPF International, and the others whose names are written here. So Mother's making sure to appreciate the leaders in the way that she can and recognizing them. They just finished a really hellish few weeks of trying to prepare for the World Summit. It was one of the most chaotic experiences I've ever had, and I've done a lot of workshops, but this was another level. And there is someone who wanted so much to attend these events, but was unable to come due to her poor health. Among the gifts I've prepared are gifts from my beloved daughter, Kathy Rigney, who she mentioned so many times in different speeches. And it would be interesting to just study Mrs. Rigney, like what does Mother love about her so much? She's really touched her heart. And, when we were in Korea in April, Kathy Rigney is in a wheelchair, and you've got Fortune Winter who's like pushing her around, but she's still there. She still attends, which must be so difficult for her health. But it's because she really loves Mother, and Mother really loves and appreciates her. I have included a CD of my favorites by trot singers, whose songs have greatly comforted Koreans during the 2 years of the coronavirus pandemic. I believe that Kathy Rigney is in Chicago right now, and Chairman Ki-Hoon Kim is a Chicago man, isn't he? Chairman Ki-Hoon Kim, please come up. Please give these to Kathy. And Mother gives these gifts to Dr. Kim to give to Kathy. And the CD of some of her favorite songs is a special gift. Imagine receiving, there's a lot of love and thought that went into that. Mother prepared that specifically. That's not something that some leaders prepared, right? Mother chose these songs and put a lot of effort into it. And Mark Brand, which must be such a nerve-wracking moment, right? Mark Brand comes before True Mother, and she gives him a gift. And there's also that CD here. Since Michael Backham and Damien Dunkley really love music, particularly Korean songs, I have also prepared CDs for them. Please take them when you leave. And then she just ends, I should conclude my words here, because I guess she feels like she's going on too long. But those CDs are very precious. And the feeling that Dr. Jenkins even got from that was Mother also wants us to learn Korean songs. So I know he was studying the Gomapso song, being ready to be able to sing it in Korean. So yeah, I feel like that was a really interesting victory speech. It was really challenging. I feel like Mother was really calling on Europe. And 9 days later, it's very interesting, is when Russia invaded Ukraine. And that it was tense at that time. Russia was kind of posturing for this invasion, but most people did not expect it to actually happen. I talked to Dr. Jenkins the day before, and who is very in tune with this kind of world. And he's like, no, it's definitely not going to happen, but something serious is happening. And then that morning, he's like, everything changed, in all caps, because it was just so shocking. But I feel like when you read Mother's speech, Mother can feel spiritually something is shifting in Europe right now. And we have a responsibility to pay attention to it. We have a responsibility to deal with it. And it makes me think about, I was talking with Dr. Ward yesterday, trying to finish my paper for school. And he was giving his testimony of being in the room with Father in the 70s, when I think 77 maybe, when Father clearly proclaimed that the Soviet Union would fall. And most people question whether or not he did that, but he was in the room. And he remembers like, Father explaining that, this is happening. And so we need to be as engaged as possible, because our spiritual work is the huge reason behind this shift. This is the reason, is because heaven is working through our work, but we need to be engaged externally so that we can also be recognized for that purpose. And we need to be able to bring some of the practical solutions and bring the right people to the stage to be able to solve this problem. So I get the same sense that Father had the wherewithal to understand what was happening in heaven in that realm, and Mother also has the sense of what's happening. And it makes me appreciate and say, okay, if Mother gives these kinds of, sometimes it can seem random, right? Like, why was Mother so strongly talking about Europe? I don't know. But then 9 days later, Russia invades Ukraine, and then you're like, holy crap, Mother is a genius, and how did heaven know that? And it's like just proof, right? It's pretty amazing. So she's also talking about China, right? And probably most of a lot is happening in the realm of China, and it's quite difficult. But what do we do about it? I don't know. But the fact that Mother's talking about it, which she doesn't usually talk about, China's a touchy subject, it makes you pay more attention. We should pay more attention and try to think about it and understand it. What is she seeing? What should we be responding to? So I feel like Mother really challenged everybody. She, of course, really honored everybody and gave a lot of motherly love, which is her way. But she really doesn't stop, right? It's a victory celebration, and she moves on to the next very important area to invest in. So I'm really just grateful for Mother's speeches and Mother's leadership, because it feels clear when you start to put the pieces together. And I think it's just such a blessing to be able to study them and pay attention to them, to kind of tap into that vibration. So